Tuesday. And so next week, by way of mentioning that we won't be having the class, we'll be having big puja celebration next Tuesday, as we did last Tuesday. So I think not everybody came to the first week, is that correct? So if you want to get the notes, make sure Susan has the email and she'll send. Awesome. See? For now, we're enjoying the bliss of silence, or the emptiness of the sound of the aircon, of one aircon. That one's fine. Yeah, that one's fine. Absolutely. And if it gets too hot, that one will be fine too. People do prefer the suffering of sound over the suffering of heat, I have discovered over the years. So last time we were doing general introduction to the Lamrim tradition and some of the history of that. And if you're following the slides, which you may be, we're on number 15. And so we were looking at the lineage coming down of the Lamrim, which is, of course, originates in the teachings of the Buddha, but being gathered together in a comprehensive format. And so we're looking at this in relationship to corresponding verses in the Hymn of Experience by Lama Tsongkhapa. And so I'll be reading out those as well. Those of you who have received the materials will have a copy of that, hopefully. We don't have physical copies here, so I'm sorry, but we do have the electronic copies. In any case, I'll read it out and we can discuss. So anytime the questions arise, happy to have those. So I just wanted to refresh that we were looking at the first few verses of this hymn of praise of the verses of homage, paying homage to this whole Lamrim lineage. And I just wanted to revisit a little bit about, well, it talks about Arya Sangha and Nagarjuna, but particularly in relation to Nagarjuna. So first of all, reading verse 3. So this is a Lamrim text by Lama Tsongkhapa. It's one of the, not the shortest, but smaller ones, not too many verses. So verse 3 says, I prostrate at the feet of Nagarjuna and the Sangha, ornaments of Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa is this world system, renowned throughout the 3 levels, who composed commentaries in accordance with the intention, in other words, the Buddha's intent, on the mother of the conquerors, so hard to fathom. So the mother of the conquerors is the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So these were the sutras that the Buddha taught in the second turning of the wheel at Rajagriha, Vulture's Peak, as we just read in the Heart Sutra. So that's called the Heart Sutra in the essence of all of those 80,000 verses down to our near 24 verses there, which are easy to learn off by heart. But then we might need teachings about that. And fortunately, we're having a visit by Geshe Shara in a month's time, just over, isn't it? Yeah, end of March. So Geshe will be teaching on that over the time that he's here. The details are online and on the email. So just looking at Nagarjuna, who was in the 4th century, 3rd, 4th century. So he was one of the great Nalanda masters, as was Asanga. So Nalanda being the university that's now in ruins, so we now all go and visit and pay pilgrimage to just right there at Rajagriha. And where all of the scholars of this lineage, basically from the Indian side, came from there. And so Nagarjuna, I just wanted to read from one of his texts, The Precious Garland, and he said that the causes of enlightenment are great compassion, bodhicitta, and the realization of emptiness. So if you and the world wish to attain unparalleled enlightenment, its root are the altruistic aspiration to enlightenment, firm like the monarch of mountains, compassion reaching to all quarters, and wisdom not relying on duality. So it means that our bodhicitta, our wish, as we say in the refuge prayer, the second two lines, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And, by here it says by listening to the teachings, or alternately we have for our for daily practice by practicing the 6 perfections, or practicing generosity and the other perfections, meaning the 6 perfections, which are the practices that engage activities of bodhisattva on the different grounds of a bodhisattva. They become perfected. So we have to, have a stable bodhicitta, which is based on, so it says, Buddhas come from bodhisattvas, bodhisattvas come from bodhicitta, bodhicitta comes from great compassion comes from compassion, compassion comes from affectionate love. So that, it gives us, and then originally equanimity, impartial view of all beings, so not discriminating. And so the idea that there's some stable bodhicitta motivation, caring concern for all beings, not a weak one that maybe at, when we start out at first, we talk about contrived bodhicitta, but it's not at all spontaneous. And then we generate it, but it can be easily lost. As one of the prisoners I was visiting, when I was visiting in prisons in New South Wales, he said, there I was in my meditation and everything was going along really well and I felt so good and peace, harmony. And then he said, five minutes later, my soulmate pissed me off. And I said, well, at least you had that 5 minutes. So that would you call, it's not stable yet, but we're all works in progress. So the idea of having immovable bodhicitta, and for that, we've got to have a universal compassion that pervades all beings without exception. Then we have to check up. Am I being partial? Am I having, some, of course, some it's easy for, but the way we progress on the spiritual path is dealing with what are like Geshe Dzogchen calls our OCs, objects of compassion. They're the ones we have to work hard on. But working hard there, that strengthens our bodhicitta. So yeah, don't go avoiding. Maybe you want to avoid. So we have to have this strong compassion and this non-dual mind. It says the wisdom not relying on duality. So a mind avoiding the 2 extremes, the mind realizing emptiness. And the awakening mind is the mind of bodhicitta. So on the basis of that compassion, bodhicitta, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. But our bodhicitta, the bodhicitta at this stage is called like sugarcane bodhicitta, or the skin bodhicitta. We might say it's only skin deep, but sugarcane is used, or as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, it's like you get a candy and you unwrap the candy and you lick the wrapper and it's sweet. And then he said it usually is. He must have been referring to some of the, shall I say, Chinese sweets that are not so sweet. At least some I've had. Not just Chinese, other ones too. Anyway, so that it's there, but it's not sunk in deeply. in the Maitreya's ornament of clear realization, so lists 22 different types of bodhicitta, like gold-like and cloud-like and sky-like and ocean-like and fire-like, many different types of bodhicittas. So that's a whole other huge topic we don't need to go into. So in brief, it's basically the essence of the Mahayana vehicle, the great path, includes great compassion, bodhicitta, and the realization of emptiness. So they're the sort of goals, if you like, for those on that path. Okay, so coming back to, and so then we talked about, we were looking at the whole lineage last week, and that this all came together, the method lineage and the wisdom lineage, bodhicitta, which is this side, Maitreya Buddha and all the great beings around Maitreya who've passed on the teachings to us, like Arya Asanga, and then Manjushri, holding the sword of wisdom, and ones like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and down to Lama Atisha, who Lama Atisha brought the whole, both sides together and wrote the Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, which is the foundation of this whole Lamrim tradition that we follow. So Lama Atisha was in the 11th century. So famously, so he was also a Nalanda scholar, and then he got all the teachings he could, Sutra, Tantra, in India, and then he had these, he would keep hearing, Tara was his, he had a direct, direct line, shall I say, to Mother Tara. And look at all our beautiful Taras on the Tara Wharf, just commenting. We're getting very excited here. Direct line to her. And so he would hear like these deities saying, oh, need to get the teachings on bodhicitta, basically. And so then he found out that the best teacher was Lama Salingpa in Indonesia. So he went there, spent the next 12 years getting all the transmission of Maitreya's ornament of clear realization and Maitreya's other texts, came back to India, and then he was regarded as the greatest scholar in India. He was at a monastery, Vikramashila, and there were, at the time in Tibet, the Dharma was totally confused, and people weren't really sure what practices to do, and they mixed things up, and it was all getting a bit, shall we say, murky and confused. And so the king of this particular area, Western area, had been thrown in prison, and because he was supporting the Dharma, and anyway, so he was thrown in prison for that. And so for his release would be to get his body weight in gold. They had to collect his body weight in gold. So they collected all the gold except for the weight of the head, which is pretty significant. It's the same as the weight of the pelvis. Anyway, so they got that, and I thought, oh gosh, we still need to get more. And he said, no, what I want you to do, I don't mind if I die. I've had many lifetimes. I've died many times. It's fine. Just leave me here. And go to India. And he didn't know, he wanted a great scholar to come from India. He didn't know Lama Atisha. I hadn't heard about Lama Atisha specifically. Anyway, cut a long story short, they had 3 expeditions in the end. And in that process, either one person survived, I think 7 went on the first expedition, 2 survived, 1 stayed at the monastery, and the other one came back. And the one who came back reported about Lama Atisha, who was there teaching, but that nobody he'd had a lot of requests, as we make to our, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, His Holiness, and so forth, and now Geshe Sharabla to come and teach and so forth. So he'd had many, many requests, but the abbot wasn't letting him go because he was their greatest scholar. So then, long story short, by the 3rd expedition, they've got a bit clearer, so they pretended to be coming to the monastery as students and secretly met with Lama Atisha, and then the abbot found out and wasn't impressed. And so they came clean, and eventually he came to agree that Lama Atisha could go, but he would have to return in 3 years' time. They didn't want to lose him. Meanwhile, Lama Atisha, with his direct line to Tara, was asking if it was beneficial for him to go to Tibet. And the response he got from Tara was, it'd be very beneficial for Tibet and for the world and for the spread of the Dharma. However, your life will be cut short 20 years. So it was like, you choose. Of course, he chose to go to Tibet. And Tara also indicated that if he did go, he'd meet his heart disciple there. So he went to Tibet. And that took them a couple of years to get there. They went and they were doing pilgrimage along the way, because that was, they were pretending they were going to be doing pilgrimage, but actually, it's, so they did do pilgrimage through India, Nepal, and into Tibet. So, and when they arrived, Lama Atisha saw all these, because all these great lamas came to greet him, and he saw them all, and they were all dressed in their refinery, looking very great and refined. And he was sort of like, oh, these are like the ghosts of Tibet. And then, of course, they came into the teaching, they took off all the finery and sat down, and they were monks' robes, and it was sort of like, okay, we can go ahead. And then they seemed to be quite scholarly, and it's like, I don't know why you've brought me here, because you've got your scholars here, until they asked questions, and the questions indicated they didn't have a clue about, this practice, that practice, didn't understand, mixed up sutra and tantra, mixed a lot of things up. And so Jangchub had requested, as a result of that Lama Atisha teach them in a sort of comprehensive fashion, shall we say. And that was the composition of the Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment. And then after the 3 years of being in Tibet, and you were supposed to go back, first of all, there was conflict happening on the border, and so they couldn't cross. And so instead they sent the text that Lama Atisha had composed back to the abbot at Vikramashila, and he was like, oh, this is the greatest gift. Yes, Lama Atisha can stay there. It's okay. We have benefited from these teachings. So when somebody composes a text like that in whatever tradition, it gets checked by a whole committee of scholars and so forth to check that it's authentic. And then even translations. So we'll look sometimes in the text and also, the so-and-so translation committee and so forth. So we'll see that, because it can't be just one person. Anyway, so this is the history of Lama Atisha bringing together the teachings in Tibet that he became famous for. And indeed, he, instead of living to 92, he lived till 72. Not a bad age, really. In the 11th century, I think he was probably doing very well. So, yes, meeting his students. So his heart disciple, it was Drontompa, and so he established the Kadampa lineage, which then forerunner of the Gelugpa lineage we follow with Lama Tsongkhapa. So don't worry if this is all confusing you. But anyway, so Lama Atisha was staying at this place, and Drontompa heard where he was staying, and so he came to pay his respects. And he was out to lunch with benefactors, and so his Lama Atisha's attendant said, look, just wait, he'll be back, just wait. And he waited and waited, and he thought, I can't wait. And so he started walking towards where the benefactors were offering lunch to their place. And along the way, Lama Atisha was coming back from the lunch, and they sort of simultaneously recognized each other, not having met before. And the rest is history. And so John Tompa became then his closest disciple, and passed that whole lineage that he received from Lama Atisha down to throughout to Lama Tsongkhapa, and then to all the teachers down to our teachers today. So, which we know to be the Gelugpa teachings that we follow, that the Dalai Lama follows. Okay, so interestingly enough, also, you know, we have over here, and actually we will be, just visualize when this Tara is over in the middle, there's going to be Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava statue here. So just create that space in your mind. Meanwhile, is over on the Tanka here, and there is a smaller Guru Rinpoche statue there, who originally established in the 8th century Buddhism in Tibet. And it's said that Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, Lama Atisha, and Lama Tsongkhapa are all of the one mind stream. So you could say that, you know, reincarnation of that mind stream. Okay. So why at the beginning of the Lamp on the Path to Enlightenment, Lama Atisha explains why he composed the text. He said, urged by the good disciple Janchub. So Janchub was the nephew of Yeshi, who was the one who was in prison. So Janchub was the one who eventually got Lama Atisha to come. So he said, at his urging, in other words, he requested those teachings. So this is how the Buddha taught. If not requested, the Buddha never would have taught. And where would we be? So this is why we make constant requests to our teachers to give teachings, and then, you know, they accept and give the teachings. Urged by the good disciple Janchub, I shall illuminate the path, the lamp for the path to enlightenment. I, the elder Dipam Karashri, so that was his ordination name, having seen it, so having seen the path to enlightenment explained in sutra and other teachings, have made this concise explanation at the request of Janchub. So he gives the subject matter, he gives his reasons for that, and particularly that Janchub raised very good questions to Lama Atisha. So he could see that he was genuine, he was scholarly, and genuinely interested in receiving that transmission. Okay. Alrighty. So in the hymn of experience, so as I mentioned last time, when it says hymn of experience or songs, or we have Milarepa's songs and so forth, when it says song or hymn, it's indicating it's coming from the realizations of the being who composed that. So in this case, Lama Tsongkhapa composed the hymn of experience. And he says that throughout the text. He says, you know, I, yogi, practice like this. You who seek liberation should do likewise. So verse 4 is about Lama Atisha. He's paying respects to Lama Atisha. I bow to Dipankara Atisha, holder of the treasury of the instructions that gathers together the important points completely and unmistakably of the paths of profound view. So following Manjushri, profound view is the wisdom side, and vast conduct, which is the method side, bodhicitta, the action, engaging in that action. And we say, you know, when we put our right hand in the left hand, the right hand's action, compassion, but based in wisdom, skillful means, knowing what we're doing, not just going out there. Look, I'm sure, you know, if I went to Central Australia and said, oh, I have so much compassion for you people suffering from glaucoma. If I got out a scalpel and said, I'll operate on your eyes, not being an eye surgeon, they would be running in the opposite direction. That is not skillful means. And I wouldn't do it anyway, by the way, because I don't have the skillful means for that. But whatever level of wisdom, skillful means, knowledge we have, combining that with our bodhicitta motivation and keep working at it, and it gets stronger and stronger. Okay. Of the paths of profound and vast conduct, the excellent lineages descending from the two great charioteers, which is Asanga and Nagarjuna. I prostrate respectfully to the spiritual teachers. So this is in general, the whole lineage. Spiritual teachers, eyes that see all the infinite scriptures, in other words, very, very learned, who with skillful means, moved by compassion, clarify the supreme entryway for the fortunate traveling to liberation. So clarify the teachers today who for us clarify bodhicitta, which is the supreme entryway for Mahayana great scope, for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation. So here it comes up later throughout the text in the order of the Lam Rim topics. But the fortunate are those who met with the Dharma. We talk about not just having a human rebirth, but a precious human rebirth, having, you know, the leisures and endowments. We'll go through those when we get to that verse. But having all the conditions coming together and wanting to get the Dharma teachings, want to draw the essence, make meaning of our lives, particularly within a Mahayana tradition where we're talking about for the welfare of all sentient beings. On one hand, it sounds overwhelming, but it's a great and vast aspiration. Okay. All righty. So far, so good? Okay. I'm like Susan, every time I do something, something else pops up and I'm like, no, that's not supposed to be there. Okay, so then I'll go on with verses 6 and 7. The stages of the path to enlightenment are the excellent lineage handed down from Nagarjuna and Asanga, crown ornaments of the wise of Jambudvipa, this earth system, and banners of fame resplendent among transmigratory beings. This instruction, the king of powerful jewels, so the Lam Rim instruction, fulfills all the desired aims of the 9 types of beings. It is an ocean of glorious and excellent explanations, gathering the rivers of 1,000 fine scriptures. Pretty powerful stuff, extolling the virtues of the Lam Rim. So this is where we come to, in the presentation of the Lam Rim, first of all, you have a presentation of, you know, the author. So let's say Lama Atisha, that Lama Tsongkhapa in the great treatise of the path extols the virtues of Lama Atisha and how he came from good family, a good education, was a great scholar, and, you know, that he was very pure in his ethics and so forth. So looking at the greatness of the author and that he had studied all sutra and tantra and was able to present that in a coherent form and not as contradictory. So then you come to the 4 greatnesses that distinguish the Lam Rim teaching. So this is what is traditionally then presented, what makes Lam Rim teaching so special. So the first point, it says, allows all the teachings to be seen as without contradiction. So just to, yeah. So if we look at all the teachings of the Buddha, we talk about the 3 pitakas, the 3 baskets of the Vinaya Sutra and phenomenology, Abhidhamma. So the three Pitakas will find, for example, that there are many interpretative and definitive teachings. So, for example, if we look again at the Heart Sutra, the Heart Sutra has explicitly, it has a teaching. What's the explicit teaching of the Heart Sutra? Emptiness. So explicitly what is obvious is emptiness. And so that's like the definitive teaching. It is one teaching that is said to be both definitive and interpretative. A lot are interpretative, which means we need to have the teachers to unpack, what's that all about? And you'd say, there's not exactly, I need to unpack the Heart Sutra. It might be about emptiness, but what's that all about? But the interpretative side is, we'd say, the more hidden side. So the wisdom of emptiness is talking about ultimate truth. From the conventional truth side, it presents on the Four Noble Truths, the 12 links of dependent origination, life and death, the dissolution process. And so it has all of that in there, but that's not its explicit focus. So unless we have it pointed out to us in commentaries, and we have quite a few commentaries on the Heart Sutra, then we're not sure what that is. So that's the difference between definitive and interpretative. So also pointing out that the teachings are not contradictory. And this can be debated by different traditions and is debated. So sometimes the Buddha taught that phenomena truly exist. So, for example, in the first turning of the wheel, that phenomena truly exist. And then at other times, second turning of the wheel, they don't truly exist. So which is right? They're both right. In the sense that the Buddha's teaching, according to the level of the capabilities of the students, what they're ready to hear. Like when you go to learn swimming, you don't get thrown in the deep end of the pool. You'll drown. Sort of like that. You know, you start not even in the water, isn't it? From my memory, it was a long time ago. I remember doing this, standing on the side of the pool. Anyway, you get what we mean. So at some times he taught there is a self, and at other times he taught everything is with no self, selflessness. And sometimes he said phenomena have an essence, and on other occasions he said everything is empty of inherent nature. So without going through all the different tenet schools, up until the school which we follow, following on from Nagarjuna and so forth, the middle way, we could say the middle way consequent school, Madhyamika Prasangika school, it has the most subtle level of you know, that emptiness or absence of a self and so forth. And you look from the lower schools, from the Great Exposition School onwards, that you see it's sort of like, yeah, everything's dependent on causes and conditions, but there must be something there from its own side. There must be something, like there must be something from the side of the object or the side of the person. And so they were unable to grasp that everything is a dependent arising, which was the unique teachings of the Buddha. But the Buddha could see that, and so taught according to their level, so that then as they progressed along the path, so that's why we have these three scopes. It's for one individual, gradually progress along the path, and you gain more and more understanding, and your mind becomes more and more ready to hear more and more teachings. We might know this at some level for ourselves. For example, we have foundational teachings and then more in depth, even on the Lam Rim, you know. So, should I say even on the Lam Rim? The Lam Rim, you could spend lifetimes. Yeah. So the important thing is that we rely on the Lam Rim teachings as laid out in the Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, that we will, if we follow in that progression, we will come to understand that there's no contradiction in the Buddha's teachings. You know, So for some, it's like, but in sutra, we're told not, to let go of attachment, to let go of attachment and generate a mind of renunciation. And then you get to Tantra, and it's about using desire in the path. You go, hold on, doesn't that contradict? But it doesn't, because you have to also have the renunciation to transform that desire. Otherwise, you're just contaminated attachment, Anyway, so there are reasons why. So none of them are contradictory, and that they're all necessary for and applicable to any individual. So our motivation is to become a Buddha. If we want to become a Buddha, the word Buddha, Sanye, means completely having purified our minds of all the afflicted states, all the delusions and so forth. And then having gained all the good qualities to perfection, having perfected all of those. So if we just take a bit of it and saying, well, for example, as a Mahayana practitioner, I don't need to worry about the Hinayana teachings, or which is basically lower scope, medium scope. That would be totally wrong. You've got no foundation, right? Of course, keep your Mahayana motivation, but it's all the teaching of the Buddha, and it's all laid out in the Lam Rim comprehensively. So it's not like we can pick and choose, I'll do this bit, but not that bit. If we want to become Buddha, we've got to do it all. We've got to do it all. And we've got to progress through all of those levels. So we might say, yes, I'm a Mahayana practitioner, but really, I don't understand karma. Fair enough, because the Buddha said only a Buddha actually understands karma, so wouldn't be a lie. I can get some grasp on it. So here we are, lower scope, So we get a good grasp on each of these and go deeper and deeper into each topic as we're progressing along the path. As I said, keeping our Mahayana motivation always, never letting that go. Okay. So basically, all of the teachings are instructions by the Buddha of what we need to practice. So it's not according to what we prefer. Of course, we're going to like certain topics or feel we resonate with certain topics more than the other, but we have to equally practice them all. So each of the scopes, and then the practice of Tantra as well. So there are debates about, but if you follow the Mahayana Sutra path, you don't have to follow the Tantra path, or more likely, if you're following the Tantra path, you don't have to follow the path of the 6 perfections. You don't have to engage in those practices. Wrong. Okay. So quote from John Tomper, one of the great teachings of my teacher is that he is teaching, giving us the 4 corners that are applicable everywhere. So imagine a tablecloth, 4 corners of the tablecloth, or I'm not going to actually do it because everything will fly. It's in diamond shape at the moment, but it has got 4 corners. So representing the 3 scopes, lower scope, middle scope, great scope, and Tantra, right? So the idea is that if you pull one corner, everything's going to come along with it. Nothing's left behind. So that's the idea. That's what John Tomper's alluding to, that it's all the practices follow on together. Okay. The second of the 4 greatnesses is it allows all the scriptures without exception to present themselves to you as personal instruction. So we have from Lama Atisha saying, first, I sought out the teachings, and then in the middle, or second, or next, it dawned to my mind that they were instructions to practice. And then the third, then I engaged in meditation practice day and night, and consequently attained all the realizations. So we take those steps. First, we get as many teachings as we can, because otherwise, what are we going to meditate on if we don't know the topics to meditate on or the outlines of how to meditate on each one? Yeah. So while it is that we have to practice everything, everything has its own time and its own order. And that was the beauty of Atisha laying out step by step the path to enlightenment. As we said, in Tibet at the time, you know, everything was confused. People didn't have an understanding of sutra and were practicing tantra. They didn't have an understanding of tantra. So there was sort of no foundation to what they were doing. And so we put everything into practice in order, following all the outlines. So it's really good to learn the outlines and what instructions go with what practices. We're very fortunate that we have so many commentaries and so forth available to us. I love, in particular, in terms of learning their outlines, the Lamrim outlines by Venerable Karen Vallam from Kopan Monastery, who's been like in charge of, I guess, the what is now called the November course, the Lamrim course that's been going on for 50 odd years, 50 plus years, including the 2 years with COVID when it didn't take place. And so she has put together that as sort of like the guiding text for that November course, which is a month long. And it just, there's a lot of content in there, but it has all the dot points all nicely laid out. Of course, something like Pabonka Rinpoche's Liberating the Palm of Your Hand, Lama Tsongkhapa, Great Treatise on the Path have that. But by the time you get to this, there's 10 of these and subsets this and that subset and that subset, you're like, what? It's confusing, can be confusing. So it's very nicely, succinctly done in that Lamrim outlines. Somebody gave me when so before I was here, I was at Chenrezig Institute, and one of my friends, when I arrived, gave me a Lamrim outline that was on a A3, A1. A1, what's the big one? A1. Anyway, big, it was big. I could never put it up because it was laminated, and it was very fine print, and it was done in all like mind maps. And so in all these sort of circular ways, and I just looked and went, I don't know, but I'm confused. It apparently worked for her. She's got a much better mind than me. But yeah, complicated. That has all the sub outlines. So Pabonka Rinpoche, Liberating the Palm, I don't have it here right now, it's out there, but it has, if you go to the back, and it will have the topic and then the subsets of that topic, and it has it like with the reference to the pages that are covering now. Yeah, it's not the index, it's the actual outline. So that's one place is very clear. Yeah. Yeah. It's, yeah. Well, probably at the time too, you probably weren't looking for things like detailed outlines of the Lamrim. So the more we go along, we will realize, oh, there's more to this, more points to this topic than I thought. Yeah, that's just what comes along. So, you know, the Buddha taught a whole variety of Dharma. We've got the 84,000 teachings. And the idea, you know, if we know the structure, we get an idea where we come across a teaching and we know where that fits. Instead of, oh, I don't know, it was just like I randomly went to this teaching and that teaching and got no idea what's what. And so if we then we might think, oh, that's not a teaching for me, and disregard it, and therefore we lose out on that. So, for example, when the Chinese went into Tibet, tragically, a lot of texts were destroyed, right? So ordinary people would just see fragments of text lying around, think, oh, I'll put it in the garbage bin because it's just a fragment of something. Whereas the scholars were going around and going, oh, that bit goes with that, you know, that bit goes with that, and putting them back together again when they could, you know. So they were the genuine experienced scholars and practitioners that knew exactly what went with what. So we want to be like that. We want to know, you know, these stages to enlightenment. And when I first started coming along for Dharma talks and so forth, there wasn't this sort of structured teaching programs. There was less, you know, I can't say I started that long ago, but that there were things in English more so than in the early 70s. But still, it was like, I think Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand was one of the first books I picked up. I loved it, by the way, straight away, somehow. Whereas other people thought, oh no, that's too hard. Because once you get used to, there's going to be a subset and there's going to be 5 points under that or 10 points under that. And, you know, maybe it's having an academic background helps, I'm not sure. Yeah, so learn the structure, basically. And then you'll realize nothing's contradictory. Oh, and that everything is an instruction for learning ourselves, for putting into practice. So then we've got point 3, allows you to easily discover the true intention of the Buddha. So as soon as I think Buddha's intent, I think Siddhartha's intent, as on Sakensi Rinpoche. And you hear that as a title of an organization, then you think, actually, what was the intent of the Buddha? Of course, the Buddha taught so that we would all, you know, to lead us on the path to enlightenment, as the Buddha said. I can't reach in and, you know, implant my realizations into you. I can't wash away your negative karma. All I can do is teach, basically. So show you the way. So the Buddha pointing at the text in the Wheel of Life that's going to appear on the back wall magically in one of our upcoming projects. So here we want to identify, so the Buddha gave many teachings with the different turnings of the wheel, different intentions, as we know, and within those different teachings, and each having their specific intention, but we're talking about the final intent, which is basically the 3 principles of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view. And so that we need to rely on the lamp of the path to enlightenment to realize this, or to rely on the Lamrim teachings, the commentaries on that. Yeah. Okay. And then the 4th one, I might just quickly do that one and then pause for this evening. Allows you to save yourself from the worst misdeed. In other words, practice once we learn about karma in particular, we're automatically going to want to abandon great wrongdoing, or when we take refuge, when we have faith and strong conviction in the Buddha's teachings. So, of course, we learn about the 10 non-virtues. There's many types of wrongdoings, even beyond that list. But here it's talking about the wrongdoing, refraining from the great wrongdoing, which is that of abandoning the Dharma altogether. So that if we rely on something like the Lam Rim, we naturally stop the negativity of abandoning the Dharma because of having certainty. And that's why these 4 greatnesses are presented. We gain certainty in the first 3 points. We've already looked at the authenticity and the qualities of the composer, the teacher, and then looking at the greatness of the text that gives us this strong conviction that there's no way we want to turn away from that. And so then understanding the teachings are free from contradiction. They are personal instructions for our own individual practice. And through that, we come to realize the Buddha's intent, and that naturally the fourth will come along, that we won't, if we have an appreciation of that, then we won't abandon the Dharma. That's the sort of context of that. And then we know, because we know that it's very heavy, negative karma, once having met the Dharma, to abandon it. So abandon it doesn't mean that you just go away altogether. It could be not following the instructions, not doing the practices and so forth. So it's got many shades in it. It's not only a total rejection of Dharma. And that happens too, you know. These people writing from prison, and a couple of them, you know, wrote and said, thank you very much for the teachings. I'm now Catholic. Great. Because you're not going to say terrible. You're going to say great. If that path works for you, fantastic. You're not about to say, you've just committed the heaviest negative karma or abandoning the Dharma, because they didn't get to the point of that understanding, that appreciation. Okay. Questions, comments, debates? Yeah.
It's kind of that balance between, say, using your own wisdom and then asking the guru's advice. And so if you ask a guru for their advice and they give you advice that you might not follow,
yeah,
is that heavy negative karma?
Yes. Yes. Sorry to say. So yeah, this is why we have a guru, to give us advice, you know. So it's always said, if you're not going to follow the advice, don't ask. I have also discovered, even if I don't ask a question, I'm given advice. I have had that, which has been, you know, like I was saying to Geshe Santon, I'm going to go and do this. And he gave me, I was just telling him while I'm in Nepal, this is what I'll be doing. And was like, gave me completely different advice, which in fact saved my life because I followed his advice. So if every, you know, I have great, strong faith that, thank you very much, Geshe, you saved my life. Kept me at sea level rather than up there. Yeah. So great conviction in that. But it said not only once seeking the advice, is that you follow the advice as soon as possible. So for example, one of the nuns up at Chenrezig Institute had written to Lama Zopa Rinpoche maybe late last year and requested to have the next level of ordination. And Rinpoche said, come now. No, he's in Nepal, Kopan, come now. And so she went to Geshe Sultan, who's the Geshe there, we have it there, and said, Geshe-la, when Rinpoche says, come now, if I take about a week to organize this, that, Rinpoche means go now. Now, right? So, you know, this is the advice we're given, that you follow the advice. Do we follow the advice necessarily? Do we follow it necessarily straight away? Of course, we have to deal with our own stuff, but that's the instruction, that the advice is instruction of what to do, and to think that the guru, we'll talk more next time about those relating to the spiritual teacher, but those advice, instructions is to help us. Right. Okay, just one last story. It was in Mandala magazine, a guy who went to Lama Zopa Rinpoche requesting, okay, he was at Bagaya. He wanted to do prostrations. And so he was basically wanting Rinpoche's blessing for that. He wrote about it. So it's not like he wrote about it in Mandala magazine. So everyone, it's general knowledge, not sort of breaking any confidence. So he went to Lama Zopa Rinpoche and requested, you know, for the prostrations. And Rinpoche said, mate, 700,000 tsatsas. So the tsatsas are the little plaster or clay. There's a few up there. images of different Buddhas. And so, thank you, Rinpoche. And the prostrations, Rinpoche. And again, Rinpoche says 700,000 satsas. And maybe it was only 400,000. Anyway, a lot of satsas. He persisted 3 times. Thank you, Rinpoche. And then Rinpoche goes, oh, well, go do the prostrations then. So he went and got the prostration board, which is what they do at Bodgai. You've got a board that you slide along for the prostrations down at the Mahabodhi Stupa. And as he was going towards the stupa, he fell flat on his back, broke his back. Guess what he ended up doing? Making satsas. It's just like, oh, well, because we can't see. So his point in writing that was follow the Guru's advice. There's a reason for it. And we can't see that reason. So, yeah. So there's a lot to say about that, and we'll talk more next week. Anything else?
You mentioned Jambudvipa.
Yeah, Earth system, Jambudvipa. Yeah, southern continent, Earth system. Yeah. In the Sangata Sutra, where it says, "Have you done coming to Jambudvipa?" Yes, but we're still here, aren't we? Yeah, it's this world system. Okay, let's dedicate. Thank you very much. And don't forget, if you haven't got the notes, talk to Susan. She'll sort you out. So now we're on page 17 for the dedication prayers, the 3rd verse down. Gewadi Nyududa Lama Sangye Dribgune Drovai Chikam Malupa De Salago Pasho Janchub Sencho Grimposhe Maki Panam Gekuchi Kewa Nyampa Me Payan Gongne Gondu Pelwa Shu. Page 19 for the long life prayers. Jikte and kam de pende mahalopa gang le jong sampel yishino kadri and song made tenzin gyatso so adib so page 22. Tu so shan shin jam gun gyao wei ten zin gun pel wei kon zog du po ze tu sum ko wei le mon tu du Pahata Sudoje Gondo Japtin Shu. Lord of Dharma, who in accordance with the various dispositions of those to be subdued, makes clear in the light of your well-spoken advice the sacred Ganden tradition, essence of Buddha's teachings, O foremost and holy Lama, to you who are supreme. O Lama, please, please live long. And Lama also is coming to Australia this year in December, going to Bendigo. And it's sort of like a 4-day or 5-day event, doing one in New Zealand and one in Australia. He doesn't want to travel around except where there are global tree initiatives. And I saw from Atisha Centre that they're actually in Bendigo. They've got one of those global tree initiatives, and because they're doing all sorts of fundraising activities around that. So this is one of OSO's initiatives of planting trees. It's sort of reforesting the planet. Yeah. So if you get a chance to go to Bendigo, it's well worth it.